If you'd like to seek a position with more of a future...
I came here to work for you because of what you've got up here. And that's not going anywhere. So neither am I. Amazing.
Man, our boy Peter has a lot of explaining to do. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very interesting Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered related video. Once again, is another discussion topic about the brand new face model of Peter Parker. And actually, I do have a very special guest to talk about this news with, of Luke Cullen, who, if you do not already, please go follow him on Twitter and other forms of social media. He definitely deserves your support in every way imaginable, and I will actually let him explain what amazing movement he has started online that a lot of people have kind of been behind after the news was revealed that John Bubniak was being replaced by Ben Jordan as the new Peter Parker.
Hi guys, so I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to talking about John and the changes, so yeah, I'm really ready to get excited just to start talking about it.
But before we dive into the heat of the matter, everyone, I do just want to point out one thing that has happened recently, where on Twitter, of course, if you don't know, the creative director of Marvel's Spider-Man of himself, Bryan Intihar, did put out a post saying to our Spidey fans, "I totally appreciate your passion, but sending me threatening notes that you will hunt you down and we will find you, you fix this now, isn't cool. With what's happening in today's world, let's be a force for good and be respectful of each other. Thank you." So, of course, guys, it's really kind of just a crazy situation again where, of course, a lot of us, myself included, and Luke here as well, are very in a huge amount of kind of shock and just disagreement with the creative choice of John Bubniak being replaced as Peter Parker in Marvel's Spider-Man, but still, we are willing to give Ben Jordan, who is the new face model of Peter Parker, a chance. A few individuals who are kind of against the change, so much so that they're willing to send out threats to Bryan Intihar and the rest of the Insomniac crew, isn't really cool at all. In fact, it's kind of a really disgusting type of behavior, and just, at this point, unacceptable from how, of course, they love Spider-Man. Everyone at Insomniac and Marvel themselves loves this character, and seeing them be treated in such a way is just kind of really harsh to see. And would we all love to see John come back as Peter? Of course, but going out of your way to try and harass the developers behind the creative change just feels wrong. So it's just really odd that this is happening. It's, in the grand scheme of things, just a game. It is a very important game to a lot of us, myself included, and Luke as well, but we just have to accept this change that is occurring and just try and embrace it as best we can. Which is why Luke started a very interesting hashtag online called #BringBackBubniak. And I'll actually let Luke explain the whole reasoning and purpose behind the hashtag and how it's not trying to force Ben Jordan out of Peter, but the fact is that we just really would prefer to see John back as Peter instead.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so when I woke up and I saw the news, I was devastated, like a lot of you, and I immediately started the hashtag, bring back Bubniak. I think John did an amazing job in the game. To me, he is like my Peter Parker. What I'll tell about, to my future kids about, like, this was the Spider-Man, this was the Peter Parker for me. But, at the same time, even though I did start the hashtag, if people saw that as a reason to send out hateful comments to either Ben, Bryan, anybody at Insomniac or Marvel, that is just, it's disgusting acts. Why? I can't think of a reason why you would even do it. These people have given us so much more than we could deserve, arguably, over the years, talking about, different suits that we want to bring in, and there was discussions about that. But, this is a big thing. It's a big thing to me, big thing to Evan, and probably a lot of you watching at home. But, there is bigger things in the grand scheme of things, and to want to send hateful messages like 2020 has been bad enough. We, like, Bryan and the guys really do not need that, and neither do we. So I really encourage no one to send any comments of that ilk.
Exactly. All we can do is hope for the best, that this change will hopefully be an improvement, or at least a interesting step in a different direction to take Peter Parker going forward into next gen, because of how this is not just going to be the face model for Peter Parker of Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, which a lot of people think of is the current situation. It's actually that this new Peter Parker, Ben Jordan, is going to be the new face of Spider-Man going forward within the Marvel Spider-Man franchise, where even though we don't know for sure if he will appear in Miles Morales, if he does, it will most likely be the new face model of Ben Jordan. And of course, when we inevitably get the sequel of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, that is most likely going to have Ben Jordan's face as Peter Parker instead of John Bubniak. And just to quote something that I actually said on Twitter, just to kind of put a final nail in the coffin on this whole situation, is that nothing can justify the actions of cruel and vile messages that are disgusting to the core. The world doesn't need any more hate. I still disagree with the change, but going out of your way to harass people because you dislike a creative choice is unacceptable. We all need to be better, and I definitely believe that for all of us, not just you guys, but even myself and Luke and just anyone who may be a bit hesitant towards the change. We're still getting used to it, very much so, but we're still hoping for the best possible outcome with this new casting choice of Ben Jordan as Peter Parker.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Ben does. But that being said, I will really miss John. I thought he was perfectly suited to the role. I didn't see an actor playing Peter Parker. I just saw Peter Parker. But then again, I do wish Ben the best. This is an amazing opportunity. I hope he absolutely kills it. None of the changes or any change made to the game should warrant any hateful or disgusting messages that we've seen directed at Bryan and some others at the Insomniac and Marvel teams. These people have given us so much, and they really don't deserve any sort of hateful comments directed at them.
Couldn't agree more, because they truly do love this character, everyone at Insomniac and Marvel, and they've clearly shown that with the first game, and we can only expect that to continue forward with Miles Morales and, of course, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, whenever that may release within 2022 or 2023 or whenever that may be. We are just both very excited for the future of this franchise. But going back to, of course, our main man, John Bubniak, is just to read really quick his final statement on the matter, pretty much about Peter Parker's change that happened the day of the news that it was released on September 30th. He just kind of left a brief statement on Twitter saying, "Spider heart forever," with the 2 emojis, and saying, "You will all forever be in my heart." So clearly John heavily cares about his involvement as Peter Parker within Spider-Man PS4. It meant a lot to us as fans when we first saw him as Peter in the very first trailer during Paris Games Week 2017. We were all speculating, what's Peter going to be doing in the game? What does he even look like? And then when we first saw him, it was John Bubniak's face onto this brand new take on Peter Parker. So, Luke, for you personally, how do you feel connected more so to Peter Parker when we actually saw him in the trailers, but actually playing as him in the game itself?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, like how much he does mean to us. I remember booting up the game, heading home from school that day a few years ago, heading home and booting it up. And, I was so excited to play as Spider-Man, this definitive display of Spider-Man, for lack of a better word. But to see the role of Peter and how much it was expressed, we got to see him at Feast. We got to see him working with Otto, which was so cool. I saw a video of it earlier on, the one where he has to track down his stuff from his room when he got evicted. And it's simple missions like that we see John at his best. The facial expressions, the kind of aesthetic that he displays. He looks like Peter Parker. Like, to me, is the definitive look of Peter Parker. He has that perfect aesthetic. I thought he did an amazing job. And, if anyone at Insomniac or even in the wider world would doubt his kind of credentials, I don't know if any of your viewers have seen, but I know you've seen it, Evan, but he was involved in a short film called Storm. And I won't spoil the premise or anything, people should go and watch it. But he had barely any lines in it, yet I understood what the character of his was feeling, hope, anguish, disappointment, anger, frustration, and all these different things we see in Spider-Man PS4. It's so well done, in dealing with Aunt May, Martin Lee, MJ. It's perfect. Like if someone said to me 5-6 years ago, he said, you're gonna get a perfect display of Peter Parker in a video game in a few years to come, I would have told them to go away. Like, don't talk to me. Like, don't even tempt me with that. But that's what we got. And, I think Ben will do a really good job, but I think it'll be hard to match the amazing work that John did as Peter Parker.
I couldn't agree more because of how absolutely fluid his facial acting alone is in some of these scenes. Of course, the most infamous one being the death scene of Aunt May. Spoilers, I guess, but I think we all know at this point that it happens, as well as the betrayal of Otto Octavius, you know, at the very end where he's finished fighting him in the Antiox and he has to make the choice of trying to either, you know, redeem him as Otto Octavius or, you know, accept the fact that he is now Dr. Octopus and take the anti-serum away from him and just leave him be and send him off to prison, which was a very heart-wrenching scene. Of course, with the amazing performances of Yuri Lowenthal as Peter Parker and William Sawyers as Otto Octavius. However, we also get moments throughout the entirety of the game, but also in those two scenes in particular, of really heart-wrenching facial expressions of you can see what the character is thinking and feeling just based off their face alone, with no, you know, bits of dialogue whatsoever incorporated into bits and pieces of the scenes, you know, where Peter's breaking down crying, where he has to make the choice to sacrifice Aunt May and also just kind of walk away from Otto. That is a huge testament to John's motion capture performance. And it kind of bugs me when people say that it isn't really that big of a deal that the face change. And I don't really like to call out people on, you know, videos and stuff, but just one person in particular, Review Tech USA. I don't know if you saw this, Luke, but he did a video just saying like, oh, it's not that big of a deal that Peter Parker's face model changed, which for some people who aren't that big into Spider-Man or whatever, I would understand that. But he basically says it's not that big of a deal, and then he follows that statement by saying, I only played some bits of the game. So, for that right there, there's not really a whole lot of connection. So, of course, it wouldn't be a big deal to you, but for us as fans and for people who played the first game, it's now kind of the fact of the matter is that Yuri Lowenthal, who's the voice of Peter, and John Bubniak, who was the face of Peter, they're kind of synonymous now, meaning that that you can't see one or have one without the other. Like, of course, John Bubniak's voice is completely different from Yuri Lowenthal himself, and John looks very different from Yuri as a whole altogether, but the character that they form as a whole within the first game is who we as fans identify, and as gamers, as Peter Parker, who we are controlling and playing as throughout the story. And some people are also trying to make the argument, well, you pretty much play as Peter 10% of the game and the other 90% is swinging through the city. That is understandable. I get that point. However, the core of the story is Peter's character, is Peter Parker as a person balancing his life with his, you know, normal day-to-day activities and, of course, his superhero life as Spider-Man. Him trying to be a scientist, working for Otto Octavius with the prosthetics, which is a great take on his character, as well as still trying to save the city as this web-slinging superhero. Now, of course, the character of Peter Parker is still there. The character of Peter and who he is still apparent because of the writing of the script and Yuri Lowenthal's performance. But one of the main facets of the character as well is John's inclusion. Because when we see these new scenes that are going to be touched with Ben Jordan's face, again, the Aunt May scene, the Otto Octavius scene, these very, you know, emotional moments where there's no action, there's no, you know, big stakes or anything happening. It's just two people talking, like Mary Jane and Peter Parker in the diner. That's just two characters talking to one another, and that is heavily carried by both the vocal and facial performances of the characters. So it really is a very perplexing situation. I do think, as well as Luke thinks, I think we can agree that it is a pretty big change to Peter visually. The core of the character is still alive and well, but the new visual aesthetic of him, especially when we see other characters in the game like Otto Octavius look exactly the same, played by William Sawyers, who is the voice and face of Otto in real life and in the game, that staying the same while Peter Parker is looking completely different is going to feel a bit jarring. Just initially it will feel weird. Hopefully, like Insomniac have said, we'll get used to it over time. I really hope that is the case, but for right now it still feels a bit, you know, dissonant to see a newer version of Peter on this character who we've already fully established 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, you know, as I said earlier, you know, I never saw an actor playing Peter Parker. I just saw Peter Parker, and same with Yuri. And I think we can agree the voice is more important because that is incorporating both Spider-Man and Peter Parker. But with Yuri, I never heard an actor playing these two characters. I just heard Peter Parker and I heard Spider-Man. You know, John did an amazing job. You know, he was super special. And those scenes, like you mentioned, you know, Aunt May's death scene, you know, so much is conveyed in so little almost. You know, he doesn't actually say a lot. It's just in his emotions and his expressions. Similar with the scene at the end of the battle with Doc Ock, you see the heartbreak in his face. And, you know, we can all say, like, oh, the voice is more important, which it is. He says, you know, when it hurts like hell. And that's what I feel when I heard the news that John is leaving, leaving the post as Peter Parker. It does hurt like hell. It's heartbreaking, but when people say, like, oh, you know, it was, you know, Peter Parker is just in 10% of the game, I'm sorry, but I totally disagree. You know, he is at least in, you know, probably 25, 30, perhaps even 40%, depending on how much time you put into the science experiments at Otto's lab. I did anything that I could because I was so connected to the character, both voice and aesthetic equally. And as you said, it will be very jarring. You know, even the scene they released with the new Peter Parker acting out that scene, I was totally taken aback. I was like, this does not look normal. This is not my Peter Parker. I was glad that people felt the same. And it was never out of anger. It was like, oh, it was never like, oh, screw you, Insomniac. Never anything like that. You know, they made a decision. It's their right. We just disagree. But, you know, I'll always treasure that first playthrough so much. And so much of it was made up of the look, the emotion conveyed by John acting as Peter. And it's something I'll never really forget.
And what you bring up is even more, you know, impactful is because of John's performance as Peter within that scene in particular, the scene that Insomniac re-released onto the PS5 remaster, and then there's also been the side-by-side comparison videos showing off the PS4 version with John Bubniak and then Ben Jordan as the new Peter, and just the reasoning behind the decision that Insomniac gave doesn't sit right with me. I know that they've gone on multiple times explaining why they had to do this, but I just want to reread it one more time so that way we're both caught up and all you viewers are caught up as well, because this reasoning does not sit right with me in the slightest. So, this does bring us to one of the bigger changes. On the PlayStation Blog website, they go on to say, in order to bring the best performances to players with our next generation Marvel Spider-Man games, plural, so of course with Marvel Spider-Man 1, Miles Morales, and of course the inevitable Marvel Spider-Man 2, we have recast the face of Peter Parker. We loved working with John Bubniak on the original game, which is good to know. However, to get a better match to Peter Parker / Spider-Man actor Yuri Lowenthal's facial capture, we have cast Ben Jordan to be the face model for Peter Parker on the PS5 console. He looks incredible in game, and Yuri's moving performances take on a new life. So, the reason why this does not sit right with me at all is because of how they're saying that they had to get a face model to better enhance the performance of the voice actor. I don't know about you guys, but I've never really seen that to be the case in any other specific game, other than, I would say, maybe The Last of Us, where Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie, does look like how she looks in real life in certain circumstances, as well as a little bit of Joel. Troy Baker, they do have that kind of similar facial traits, but of course, when they try and show Ben Jordan as this new Peter, the first impression that everyone is having, including myself and Luke, is that, what else? He looks like Tom Holland. It looks like a Tom Holland deepfake, and it just feels incredibly distancing from the original version we caught of Peter in the first game. Because the great thing about that is that Peter didn't really look like any other actor. You know, some people may have said he looked like a discount Andrew Garfield, but I think John looks distant enough from the other actors to look like, that looks like a Peter Parker to me. That looks like a version of Peter that is in his mid-20s, he has been Spider-Man for 8 years, has seen some stuff as Spider-Man, and is also experienced both as his superhero alter ego and him as Peter Parker. He's not a young kid anymore. He's not in high school. He graduated college. He has a job. He's not even at the Daily Bugle anymore. And just seeing the evolution of Peter's character with John's face enhancing that version of Peter made it all the more believable. But now that we have Ben Jordan, who, if you do look at photos of him in real life, I can see it. He does look like a younger version of Yuri in specific photos, and I'll put it on screen right now too. He does look like a more youthful version of Yuri Lowenthal in real life. That's fantastic. The problem is how that's translated into the game's visuals, and how, right off the bat, he looks just like Tom Holland. And I don't understand why people are trying to deny this, because it definitely does look like a different version of just like a tie-in game. of Tom. Like, if this was like a movie tie-in game, I could easily see this being like a Far From Home tie-in, just with a recasting of Peter Parker to make it look more like Tom. And I do have some thoughts on that, which I will dive into a bit later. But if they were so, hesitant to try and change Peter initially, but then wanting to get a new look for Yuri's impressions and facial capture motto, and just how they wanted to make him a brand new character to enhance Yuri's overall aesthetic, why not, in that case, just scan Yuri Lowenthal? I mean, there have been instances directly, I can think of a game right off the bat, Death Stranding, where Norman Reedus was both the face and voice of Sam Porter Bridges in that game, and it looked incredible. However, Troy Baker was the main antagonist, and they just scanned Troy Baker to enhance his performance, which is great, because he brought that character Higgs to life in Death Stranding. The same thing with Joel. Again, it kind of looks like a different version of Troy Baker, but he still looks different enough to make it look like that is, in fact, Joel Miller from The Last of Us. That's not just Troy Baker as Joel. We just see Joel, like what you said. I don't see Yuri Lowenthal or John Bubniak as Peter. We just see Peter Parker, and that is completely accurate. The performances of all those characters sell the game and the story of the game, and the reason why people love Spider-Man PS4 so much is because of Peter Parker, not because of Spider-Man himself. That's a huge part of the game, don't get me wrong. The swinging, the combat, the visuals, the villains we all love, that's a huge part of Spider-Man. But the core thing that we as fans connect to the most is Peter himself. So when we see this newer take on the character that looks identical to another version we already have in the films, instead of making it look more similar to Yuri Lowenthal or Ben Jordan, feels a bit odd. It doesn't feel like it's natural, and it makes it feel not as genuine of a take on the character of Peter Parker that we all know as what we would like to. And again, seeing Ben Jordan's face during those new scenes, of course with Aunt May and Otto Octavius at the very end of the game, what happens then? I don't know if Ben Jordan's character model in the game will be able to convey as much emotion as John will.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of on the same wave. Like, man, I was very skeptical, and once people actually did start pointing out, like, hey, this really looks like Tom Holland, I was like, oh my god, it does. For me, and some people might know on Twitter, I'm not a huge lover of Homecoming and Far From Home. I think Tom Holland can do great things as the character. I just don't think he has been given the opportunity to. So when I see changes, and it changes for the new Peter Parker, and it looks so like him, it's kind of frustrating. We loved John Bubniak as Peter Parker because not just because of his aesthetic and how wonderful he acted as the part, but also because he looked totally different. People make the joke that he was a discount Andrew Garfield, but to me he looks totally different. Yet all of them still look like Peter Parker. But to me, John Bubniak is the definitive look of Peter Parker. And when you're talking there about other actors, Laura Bailey, she voices MJ, and she does a spectacular job. But she, similar to John Bubniak and Yuri Lowenthal, she does not do the face capture for MJ. I believe that's Stephanie Taylor, who does a brilliant job, totally capturing that role perfectly. I understand the character of Peter is a lot more important than MJ. Because we play as him, we see him a lot more. But if from what we know so far, if no changes has had to be made to MJ when there's two people combining for that character, then I really don't understand why the changes need to be made for Peter Parker's character. Feel free to correct me in the comment section, guys. But because I don't really know a humongous amount about the technology, but we have unbelievable technology in the gaming world today. I find it very hard to believe that as we cross over from one generation to the next, the PS4 to PlayStation 5, I find it hard to believe that such a substantial change was needed to have been made. We have unbelievable technology at our disposal, and I know it is a lot simpler, but I've seen people kind of almost combine John Bubniak and Ben Jordan on the face of Peter Parker, and it looks brilliant. It looks really, really good. Obviously, I know that's just a still image. There's a huge difference between that and full game, but I really don't understand why they've done it. I would like them to change it back. I think maybe Ben could do a different character, whether it's casting as someone else. Even if they wanted to cast him as Harry Osborn, I know we did see, kind of a face for him and a voice for him in the side missions for the science experiments, which were brilliant. But I think that would be a less monumental change for the character. But I really don't understand why this change needed to happen. I think it's a little bit suspicious, a little bit sus. as the word kind of goes around now with the Among Us being the game of the day. I'm open to the change. What I hope that Ben Jordan is going to give it his all. You know, I would in that situation. I'm sure Evan would say the same. You know, this iconic character, and for me, even if I get to play 30 seconds of him, let alone a 25-hour game, which, you know, a couple of hours of Peter Parker in it, would be amazing. So I do wish Ben the best, but, you know, just kind of going back to it, I really don't see the need for the change. I think it's needless. I think it's tacked on. It's really disappointing, but look, it is what it is. We got to move on. Since 2016, up to 2020 now, this is really the only downside I feel Insomniac have made to the Spider-Man universe. I don't think it'll be the last kind of L that they'll take, but, you know, they've given us so much, and I am still 100% willing to put my faith in this amazing team.
Absolutely. Perfectly well said. And that's just a great thing to reiterate, is that Luke and I are both extremely excited for the remaster. I mean, look at that. We got 60 FPS gameplay, the amazing Spider-Man suit with 2 other costumes that are going to be included, 3D audio, the DualSense controller, haptic feedback, so it's going to feel amazing to play. It looks visually incredible with the screenshots they showed. We can't wait to play through it, because we are both going to buy it for ourselves once it releases, for sure. We just wish that the facial animations of Peter Parker were, instead of being completely switched, were instead enhanced with John, because the weird thing about this, again, is that, like you said, in a great comparison, Laura Bailey is the voice of Mary Jane Watson in Spider-Man PS4, while Stephanie Tyler is the motion capture face model for the character herself. Same thing goes for other characters like Black Cat, my favorite character in the whole game. You guys know me. Felicia Hardy is voiced by Erica Limbeck, and 2 other people are the motion capture actress as well as the face model for the character. It's a total of 3 separate individuals making up one whole character in the game. So if for some reason Peter Parker is the only character that gets a face swap in the remaster, that is going to be incredibly suspicious. Because the reason why Otto Octavius has not changed, because he's voiced and faced by the same person. William Sawyers is the motion capture actor and voice actor for Otto Octavius. Stephen O. Young is the voice and face of Mr. Negative. Nancy Lenari is the face and voice of Aunt May. So that is why those characters will more than likely stay the same. But the other characters in the game who are faced and voiced by different people are the ones who I think who are most susceptible for the change. So Peter Parker, Mary Jane, Felicia Hardy, Yuri Watanabe, maybe some of the other side villains, we don't know for sure. We'll find out. But if Peter is the only one who is changed compared to everyone else, again, that is going to be incredibly, incredibly strange to see. And it's also even stranger when you see that there are fan edits out there, like you mentioned earlier, Luke, of John Bubniak facially enhanced, like you guys see in the thumbnail. This is a fan edit of how John Bubniak could look enhanced on the PS5 compared to how he is on the PS4, and this looks absolutely insane. This is genuinely what I really wanted to see, and what I thought was going to happen when they first said we're going to get a brand new next-generation Peter Parker. So I thought, oh, they're just going to get John back and upgrade him 10 times over to make him look even more hot than what he already is, because my man is a stud. Trust me, he is gorgeous. So when they showed this new Peter, I felt incredibly put off. I was incredibly shocked, and I had no words for when that happened. And instead, this fan edit, and there's been other, switches and transitions, kind of changing the hairstyle of Ben Jordan, all that. But I think this is the definitive look of how we all imagined the next generation Peter Parker would look, and would easily translate into the description that Insomniac provided of trying to translate the performance even better with Yuri Lowenthal's acting as Peter Parker onto a new model. Instead of getting someone completely different, they could have just visually enhanced John Bubniak, or again, try and scan Yuri Lowenthal himself and just de-age him. Since Yuri Lowenthal in real life, I believe, is 47, 48 years old, he looks amazing as is. And I would really have liked to seen him in the role of Peter if that was the case. If they really wanted to try and get a new character model, I would have actually preferred they scanned Yuri and just have him as Peter. Because I think that Yuri Lowenthal himself, acting what he said and has shown online, he is in there doing all the scenes as Peter in the mocap suit, during the acting on stage, acting out all these lines with the emotion that he carries in the role, and it's fantastic. It's really, really great that the job he does as the character, again, that is one of the biggest highlights of Spider-Man PS4, is Peter Parker's characterization. but it also is transferred even further because of the connection we have to Peter visually, thanks to John Bubniak. And if that new model is not translated in the best way possible with all those heart-wrenching emotional scenes, then trust me, it's not going to carry and hit as much as we are wanting it to. There's no ill intent towards Ben as a whole, since he's simply just filling in a job to take on the new life of Peter going into next gen, and I, for one, like Luke said, hope he absolutely nails the performance as Peter during those scenes. However, we as fans and as gamers who have played throughout the entirety of the first game are already so connected and emotionally enveloped within Yuri/John's performance synonymously as the one and only Peter Parker within Insomniac's universe. So again, seeing a newer version of that, even though they will say that we will get used to it, for me personally and for Luke as well, it's going to take a lot of time to get used to.
Yeah.
We really want Ben to do a phenomenal job, but it's just not going to feel the same as when we initially played through the game our first time in 2018. Which kind of brings me to my really out of the ballpark tinfoil hat theory, because again, there's a lot of statements that Insomniac have made about this, but I think there's actually a lot more beneath the surface. Because first off, a face model isn't just a face model, or a character model for a character within a game isn't just there to look pretty and have their job be finished then. John and I had an interview in E3 2018, and he said he was actually in character as Peter Parker, acting out the scenes in certain parts of the script. Of course, with that being the Aunt May scene, the Doc Ock scene. So he is there acting out these lines so that they can gather facial data of John as Peter. So that is not just them saying, oh, they scanned him and that's it. No, he was there during the development process, I should say, to make sure that he could convey as good of a Peter as he possibly could muster, and he did an incredible job. Now, what we see here is that they have a whole new model, while even though they are saying it's based off the facial version of Ben Jordan in real life to match Yuri Lowenthal's performance to try and look like a younger Yuri, it still has this uncanny valley look of making it seem like a deep fake Tom Holland, which is where the tinfoil hat theory comes in. If you guys don't know, Insomniac was bought out by Sony in 2019. When they got their PlayStation Studios partnership, they're now a full-on first-party worldwide studio development team for Sony Interactive Entertainment. This was, of course, because of the success of Spider-Man PS4 back in 2018. It's the highest-selling superhero game of all time, and that game was made before the partnership even commenced, meaning that Insomniac was a third-party studio that was making a first-party game. They were not owned by Sony directly, and they started development of Spider-Man PS4 back in which year? 2014. The same year as when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out in theaters with none other than Andrew Garfield. And of course, that's kind of the comparison people might be making, is that, well, John Bubniak looks like a little bit of a discount version of Andrew Garfield, and in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they kind of had that older/mature look of Peter, even though in that movie, Peter had just graduated high school. By the beginning of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So they try to make Peter look more mature with John Bubniak's take, who some people view as a discount Andrew Garfield. Luke and I feel different. Luke and I think he does look different enough from Andrew and even Toby and Tom to make it look like his own distinctive Peter Parker. But now, Andrew Garfield is no more as Spider-Man. We obviously have Tom Holland as the live-action Peter Parker in Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, and whenever Marvel's Spider-Man 3 comes out, you know, the MCU version of Marvel's Spider-Man 3, with Tom Holland as Peter Parker. And now, since Sony is owning Insomniac, and they're making more Spider-Man games in the future, of course, given how well the first one did, we now have the spin-off game of Miles Morales, where Najee Jeter looks the same as Miles, because again, that's another circumstance where he is both the face and voice of Miles. So it's not like that they're going to change him because they feel like it, it's actually because they can't change him. They already have established Najee as Miles in the first game, both with the face and the voice. But it's different for Peter since he's both a face and a voice separately. Yuri is the voice, while John is the face. So, now that we have these new Spider-Man movies coming out with Tom Holland, and Insomniac is now owned by Sony, I feel like they're trying their most to try and synchronize both of the games and the movies together to make people think of one iteration of Spider-Man for both versions. And that, of course, being the most recent one in live action, is Tom Holland. But It's funny because the reason why Spider-Man PS4 sold so well is because it was nothing like the movies. It was nothing like Tobey's films or Andrew's films or Tom's films. It was its own thing. That was a completely different version of MJ we've never seen before. That was a completely different version of Dr. Octopus we've never seen before. And that was a completely different version of Peter that we've never seen before. And John was one of the main factors as to why that is. And now that we have Ben Jordan in the role, filling in the shoes of John for the visual performance, it makes me think that Sony is the main ones who kind of forced Insomniac to switch it up to make it connected more to the live-action films of Spider-Man, intertwined within the game's world of Peter Parker. Even though they are continuously saying it was a technical issue, it was not because we didn't like working with John, we love John, we just wanted a better technical performance to carry over for the visual translation of Yuri Lowenthal's performance as Peter Parker into the role of the game remastered on next gen. And for me, I think, I don't want to say this, but I do think it kind of is a flat out lie. I think that there is some truth to it, but I think that there are some other factors that they're not telling us about the business dealings or the specific matters as to why they decided to even make this change in the first place, because no one in their right mind was complaining about how Peter looked from Spider-Man PS4. The majority of people, if not everyone, loved Peter from the first game. That was one of the main reasons why it sold so well, again, is because of Peter and his character. Not because of his face, but of course because of the characterization of Peter from Yuri Lowenthal's performance and the writing. But again, John was an integral part of Peter's overall aesthetic in the game. So seeing that, I feel like Sony are the ones kind of pulling the strings here, making these changes that Insomniac is saying that they're making themselves, comes off a bit strange to me. And I know that's a crazy theory, that's just a game theory, little meme, but still, I think there's a very high chance that Sony are pretty much the big dogs in charge when it came to switching Peter's face. But Luke, what do you think about all that? Do you think that this is a interesting choice for Peter's visual model? Of course, we love John, but would you rather have him look like this now or a bit more aged up? Or do you think that this was just kind of a weird dealing that Sony had to make with Insomniac to carry over the game onto next gen?
I'm going to be completely honest, as I have been throughout this whole thing. I don't want to believe you. I don't want to believe the fact that Sony have, some corporate meddling. They go to the Insomniac offices and say, hey, this is our live action guy, Tom Holland. He's making us a lot of money. Put him in your game. No ifs or buts. End of story. I don't want that to be true, but you're making a great case for us. Like I said, I don't want to believe you, but I think that could be a plausible reason why. But in terms of what he looks like now, do I think he looks like a Peter Parker? 100%. We all have different imaginations of what we think is the Peter Parker in our minds. Mine could be different to people in the comments, people watching, all these sorts of things. To me, the Peter Parker to me was John Bubniak. I never doubted it for a second, and I think Ben does look like a Peter Parker. I don't think he looks like the Peter Parker for this universe. But like I've seen some, photos of Ben, and he looks older than they have displayed him in this, in the new game that's coming out. He does look older. He looks, I don't know what age he is, but he must be around the same age as John, or what Peter is in the game universe. And it's almost like they've de-aged him, made it look younger to make him look more like what Tom Holland is. And Tom Holland, I think he's doing a good job of what he's been given. I don't like what he's been given, but he's done a good job. But for him, he's so lucky that he looks a lot younger than he actually is. In Homecoming, I didn't like the movie, but if it was said this is I believe a 15, 16-year-old Peter Parker, I was like, yeah, I 100% believe that. I think they might do work on the aesthetic of Peter Parker now for the PS5 release. They've seen the kind of controversy when it comes to the horrible comments directed at Bryan and others, and then just kind of simple frustration and sadness from people like Evan and myself. I think they will do some sort of change. They might age him up, hopefully. Even add a little bit of stubble. I know Evan has probably seen it, but I don't know if some of you guys have seen it. But for concept art for the original game, they had Peter Parker with almost like a small beard, a bit of a stubble, and he looked brilliant. So they might do something with that. He looks younger than Miles Morales in this new format, which is really, really weird. I don't like it, but it is what it is. I like I said, just to reiterate, I hope you're wrong. Like, I don't want to believe you, Evan. I hope that there has been no meddling. I do want to believe Insomniac when they say, look, it's just a technical issue. I actually don't, and that's not a, you know, out of anger or anything like that, or like, I'm not going to go like, oh, I'm never going to buy your game. Of course I will. They've given us so much, but it is a little bit suspicious. And, you know, like I said, I really don't hope it's anything to do with corporate meddling, because we treasure this version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man so much, and for it to be tampered with such things, it really does bring a slight downer on the whole experience for me.
And all we can do, even though this is a very, very strange change to the overall aesthetic of Spider-Man PS4, it is just one factor within the overall massive scope of the game. Of course, the swinging is going to be still the same. The graphics are going to look even better in the remaster. Gameplay is still going to feel incredibly smooth, especially with the 60 FPS performance mode. Story is going to be exactly the same. The amazing narrative we already experienced in the base game, as well as all 3 DLC chapters, with more suits, new photo mode features, new trophies. All these incredible assets to the remaster are all excellent. Luke and I are both extremely stoked to play the game for ourselves. It's just that us as fans really, really connect with this version of Peter, and that is a huge influence of John Bubniak and Yuri Lowenthal. Still, we both wish, as well as the entire Spider-Man community, we wish Ben Jordan as the new Peter the best. We do hope that he brings some really special traits to Peter during his performance, but we will just have to wait and see as to how that ends up turning out once the remaster comes out in less than 2 months. But with all that said, everyone, that is our overall thoughts on the full-on re-overhaul of Peter Parker's face model in Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, from John Bubniak to Ben Jordan. Let us know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. Do you like the change of the new Peter on the PS5? Do you wish they brought John back? Do you wish that they upgraded John to make him look even sexier in the remaster and the sequel? Do you think that Ben will bring some very interesting traits to Peter's character in the game? And if you had any improvements as to what you would think that they should do to make Peter look a bit better with Ben Jordan's new model, what would it be? And please let us know. But Luke, do you have any final thoughts on the matter, and what is your take on just the whole situation?
I'm going to miss John so much. I've asked him at Twitter to kind of let him know how much he meant to me. For me, in 2018, Spider-Man was my game of the year. I think there was better games. I think, you know, let's say God of War, I think that is a better game. But for me, Spider-Man, nothing will ever top that. And so many moving parts, all executed brilliantly, and John was a huge part of that. I'm going to miss him so much. I really hope he gets to do amazing things in the future, which I'm sure he will. And who knows, maybe he will be able to do a live action Peter in years to come. Or maybe he might come back, you know, maybe this could be, you know, maybe a prank or something, or maybe they will say, look, we found out a way to bring John back. That's what I really hope. Again, nothing, you know, no hate towards Ben. I hope he does a great job. So maybe changes might be made. Maybe John will come back. Who knows? Maybe they'll be able to combine John and Ben. I know you mentioned how they've done a similar job for Black Cat and Felicia Hardy as 2 parts. But yeah, that's kind of my resounding points. It's been amazing to be here, but yeah, again, I wish John the best. I'll never forget the performance he gave, and I wish Ben the best. And you know, thanks to Insomniac for everything. Even though we do disagree, none of this is out of hate or spite. You know, they've given us so much, and this is just the thing we disagree with. But it is what it is.
It's all from a place of love, guys. Truly, we all genuinely love everything about this game. It's just that we heavily disagree on this one aspect that Insomniac decided to choose for Peter, but still, all we can do is hope for the best and just really, truly witness how great this game is all over again in next gen onto the PS5 with Ben's performance. Who knows, it could possibly surprise us once it is fully released by November 12th, but we will just wait and see until how exactly that is going to translate into the cutscenes and where Peter is going to be interacting with all these extremely important characters, and we can only cross our fingers that it will be just as impactful as when we experienced it for the first time with John Bubniak as Peter. But again, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Please, please, please go follow and support Luke on Twitter as much as you can. I will leave all the social media links in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. Feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy. And without further ado, everyone, peace out.
So many people have their own vision of what Spider-Man should look like, what he should sound like, and in the end, we just have to put a new and fresh twist on who he is.
You got this, you got this, you got this! We understand what this character means to people in here, and we're making this game with a lot of heart, and we're gonna do whatever it takes to give people the ultimate Spider-Man experience, the game that they've been waiting for.